institution coming into the space, I personally wouldn't want that the industry consider it at the end, because I think then again that's not my vision, let's say. So for me, it wouldn't be the end, and I hope that we don't collectively decide that this is the end of that cycle. I hope we see this as a validation, like it's a validation because that industry wants in. And they realize that to retain their position, they need to be part of this ecosystem. So I think this is a very strong validation of the value proposition of the technology. And for me, this should kickstart the second phase, which is the getting to maturity.
Bravery on, stay aware, stay ahead, stay on. News flows, AI scanning, markets breathe, blockchains running.
This is Riverian Studios. My name is Urian Banconsejo, otherwise known as Yuri, your blockchain explorer, Web3 wanderer, and AI enthusiast. And today I am so fortunate to have Maud from Alephium. So we met in Singapore. We were able to have a brief interview then. But of course, I mean, the ecosystem that she's handling is like much bigger than what we were able to talk about. So finally, we get to sit down, relax, and like just talk about Alephium in a much wider scale. So Maud, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me again. It was already a pleasure in Singapore, and so it's a pleasure again today to be with you.
Likewise, yeah. It was too bad we weren't able to actually sit down and relax and have that thing. So we had to interview while standing up just because like everybody was busy. There's so much going on. But right now we
Yeah.
finally get to sit down. And I think before we start talking about Alephium and the technology behind it, the intricacies, like let's talk a little bit more about you. So I know we talked about your background career-wise, but like I want to go a little bit further. So our first question hopefully brings out a little bit of nostalgia. When you were a kid, what was the first lesson you had about money and how did that change over the years?
I mean, I think I want to say I think I grew up relatively privileged. Not really rich by any means, but I would say like I grew up in France. I'm French, but I think compared to people around me, my family, was relatively good, and so I think the first lesson is that is the privilege of it, like the that even though it is a bit regrettable that money brings you a lot of privilege that come with it. And so I think that would be the first thing money wise that I can really think or remember is the privilege and to some extent the freedom that it brings to your life when you have money.
How did that change when you started working, when you started earning your own money, started investing, and so on and so forth?
So I don't really invest, but I started working really pretty young because I think I had my first job. I was 14. I was actually working in a ski rental shops, and so I was spending my weekend and holidays renting skis and snow boots and snowboards to people. So I always enjoyed working, and I think from then on I had a little break when I was when I was 17, 18. But then from 18 on, I kind of always worked also on the side of the studies. As a way again to, of course, when I was studying, my parents would pay for my rent, for the school supply and things like this, but that was it. If I wanted anything others, and I did at the time, I wanted to be able to travel, and so I worked a lot. But I think for me, the thing that really changed it's not so much my perspective about money, but just for me, it was never really about making money in itself. I always wanted to work because I was raised with maybe it's a generational thing of you accomplish yourself through work. So and work also allows you to secure your financial stability and things like this. But there was a lot of like realizing yourself through work. And I think around COVID and during COVID, I think my perspective around work, money, and everything shifted a lot. And I saw both work and money then as a little bit more as a way to achieve freedom in our current society. Again, I wish it was not, but I think I put a bit less emphasis after that into realizing myself through work. I always approach work like when I work, I always want to do the best I can. But that's more for myself rather than to prove myself to the world or to my parents through working, you know? So it's more, it's about being proud of myself for me, like doing a good job, knowing that whatever I've done, I've given my best. And then both of them together also hopefully to achieve financial freedom before I'm retired, basically, I would say. And yeah, I saw more money as a tool rather than an objective in itself.
That's pretty awesome. Our next question is more about maybe leading towards the tech Alephium side. So before going into Alephium, I know you mentioned snowboarding. Maybe you could give a snapshot of the progression towards your role right now as the COO of Alephium. But before Alephium, what were maybe some of the milestones that you were most proud of that might have nothing related to crypto or might have nothing related to tech?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think I was actually, if I have to think about milestone I'm really proud of, they are still work related, I would say. I got married. That was a milestone I'm very happy about. But that was after Alephium, so that doesn't really count. I mean, so I studied engineering, but I actually never graduated. So I actually don't have any degree beyond baccalaureate, which is what you get at 18 when you're in France. And my first job was as an intern in a startup. And I basically went from being the marketing intern to being the right hand to the founder throughout the growth of the startup. And then in my next job, which was in a crypto exchange, it's kind of the thing. I arrived for something very specific, and I ended up taking a much broader executive level role into the company. So I think one thing I'm proud of, especially towards myself, is I proved to myself that even though maybe I didn't finish my engineering degree, I'm still able to be successful professionally. And so, yeah, I think that was like kind of teaching myself through that. And then I eventually did get a degree, but in HR in Switzerland. So, yes.
I want to ask a little bit more about the transition from marketing all the way to operations, because like that's kind of a wide gap. And people in the marketing side, personally, the way I see it is people on the marketing side, they don't really like the operations. People on the operation side might not think that much about the marketing. How were you able to make the shift, and what skills were maybe the most transferable?
I mean, I had when I started, so the startup when I started, we were 6, right, or 5. So basically the answer to your question is startup life. You know, there's so many things to do and someone needs to do it. And I was just the intern. Of course, the original cap I had was the marketing side, so I could write, some articles, publish some blog posts. But obviously, in a startup, especially in a growing phase, there's more and more things to do. And because I'm very curious, and I do have, even though even though I don't have a degree there, I do have a scientific background. And so it was a tech startup. So to write articles, I wanted to understand the tech better. So because I like to understand what I write about. And so then I became very familiar with the product. I had to explain it a lot. So then it leads to doing a little bit more BD side of things. And then I was helping a little bit everywhere. Actually, it's a pretty funny thing because the founder of Alephium worked in that same startup. That's where we met. And one of my first random non-marketing tasks I had to do was to write, I don't know where the HR girl was at the time. Maybe I don't know where she was, but I basically had to write his application so he could get a visa to stay at the end of his studies because he's originally from China. He was studying in Switzerland. And we wanted that he could stay and work. And in Switzerland, if you're not from EU, it's a pretty complicated process. So I wrote I made a very convincing plea for him to stay in Switzerland. So that's kind of where we met. And so, yeah, I think it was just, I was young. It was, I wanted to prove myself. And thankfully in a startup, in a fast growing startup, you have many, many opportunities to prove yourself and to help. And so it was basically this. I just started, being a little bit everywhere and it grew from there. And I think
So
you asked about, sorry. I was saying, you asked about the most transferable skill, and I think this is general, not to marketing. I think it's about, again, understanding something or logic. It's about learning, basically. Are you able to learn quickly and to apply whatever you learned to the task that you're doing right now? Because I think, it's not true for every job, but I think, and again, it's all about how great you are at doing it. But I think in most fields, being able to learn quickly and to apply whatever you learn to the task in a smart way, right? To find what is relevant for your current situation, what is not relevant. At the time, because ChatGPT didn't exist, right? Google was my best friend. Everyone's like, oh, how did you learn how to do everything? It's like, well, I Googled it, and I read, and then I just did it.
So you mentioned you were actually working with the founder of Alephium during the early days of the startup. Could you tell me a little bit more about his transition from working at that startup to starting Alephium? And then maybe later on, you could also tell about your transition from working there to Alephium.
Yeah. So we didn't work closely together in the startup because he was, I forgot exactly, he was a engineer. He was I don't remember his title, but basically was working on the algorithm. So we were working in a startup that was doing software for self-driving cars, but in the context of mobility service. So how do you, if you have a fleet of self-driving cars that are all electric, and you have to think this was in 2015. So before, electric car were a thing. So it's basically, he was working on the algorithm, the logic basically that decide which car takes which trip, when do they go and recharge, and kind of that whole brain basically behind your mobility service. And I was more on the marketing, BD, operation, sales. But I wrote a lot of technical documentation. So in some cases, I also interacted with the tech team, but we weren't very close. I think after Alephium, I'm not 100% sure. I think he went on to work for a big, I forgot how, telecom company in Switzerland. I think as a data scientist, I'm not 100% sure. And then I think after a while, he didn't enjoy that kind of work. And so he spent some time writing the foundation, developing the foundation technology that are the base of Alephium. And for me, my transition was, so I stayed in the startup longer than Cheng. I stayed, I think, at least a year more after that. But then I needed a change. I felt I learned so much. It's like, really, I learned so many things that I still, benefit from today. But I felt I've reached kind of a plateau or where I could go in this startup. So I looked for alternative. I didn't have any degree. So I had to look through my network, basically people who had worked with me. And despite on paper, me only having like 3 years or 2.5 years of experience in a startup, that they would value it because they have worked with me. And so one of my former colleagues from that startup, who actually also worked at Alephium, it was not planned, but he went on to work in this crypto exchange based in Switzerland. And so I knew nothing about crypto at the time, but they were heavily recruiting. And so I got recruited into the exchange. It was in December 2017. And it was a little bit of a baptism by fire because I don't even think I knew what Bitcoin was at the time. And if you remember December 2017, it was the ICO hype, Bitcoin hit 20,000 for the first time, Ethereum had the crypto kitty thing, and we really were feeling the scalability limitation of the of the original chains, you know? And so for me, I thought, oh, I will just, while I'm on my notice period from my previous job, I'll just on my free time start helping answering question on Telegram. Except it was insane because, you know, the exchange was a semi-decentralized exchange. So all transaction happened on chain. And so things, trade were taking hours, transfer sometimes were taking days because of how congested the entire network was. And I ended up, I remember like on Christmas, just answering people under the table because it was very chaotic, but I learned a lot very quickly, obviously context based. And then I stayed in this company for, again, 2.5 years until they were not able to, I mean, they got the, how to say, like the provisionary approval for a license, but never managed to raise the regulatory capital associated with it. And so as a result, they kind of scaled down the company to just really the minimum. And so a lot of people left at that time. I did a little bit of maternity leave replacement back into that first startup because one of the co-founder was on maternity leave. And then one day, someone from this crypto exchange that I worked there was like, hey, do you know about Alephium? I see you worked with some people in the past. What do you think about them? I gave my feedback and I was like, oh, if this guy, Philip, who actually also works at Alephium now as a part-time CFO, I was like, oh, if he's asking about Alephium, and I knew he was very into, the Web3, the DeFi space. I was like, they must be doing something right. And so I just joined the Telegram chat and say, hey. And because I think there was maybe 30 people in the Telegram chat, Sheng was like, hey, what are you doing here? Nice, let's catch up. We had a call and they offered me a job because at the time they were basically 3 people in the team, only developers. I mean, it was two and a half. One person was part-time. 3 developers. All of them I had worked with at Best My, like that first startup. And they were in the middle of the pre-sale that we did. And they just needed someone to do everything because they focus on the development, but obviously you had a lot of things to build up. And that's how basically I joined Alephium and then also did a little bit of everything at Alephium, especially in the beginning because I was the first non-developer. So I did marketing, I did admin, I did operations. Yes. And thankfully, over time, the team grew and I could reduce a little bit what I had to cover on my own.
That sounds like a really successful startup transition where the companies you worked with were super aggressive, but at the same time, you were able to stack so many skills. I think the next question I have is more on when you heard Alephium for the first time, how did it hit you? Or like, what were some things about Alephium that you found interesting before you started to join the company?
Yeah, so I think working at the crypto exchange, it's something more general about the Web3 space. One thing I learned and became very passionate about, because also what I was at this crypto exchange, also when COVID hit, is about working from. What I love about the Web3 space is one, the distributed team, that you work with the right people no matter where they are. Also, actually, being able to work from home and having a little bit more freedom about how you manage your time. And I felt like from a human perspective, when it comes to teams and how teams are built and how people work together, Web3 was way more advanced than any other industry. Because again, I think there's a lot of power in not being limited to geography when you look for people to work with you, and it allows you to bring together so much more diversity in the team. And I think diversity is key to resolve creativity, because you need people with different experience and everything like this. So I really love this about the crypto industry, and so this is something that made me want to stay in that industry. That I was very passionate about. I also, again, I felt in the crypto exchange, there was a chunk of my time where I really focused on HR. That's why I ended up doing this HR degree. And I felt very strongly about that as a team member, as an employee, or even if you're a contractor, doesn't matter, you're giving to the project, to the company, your most valuable thing, which is time. It's like time is the most valuable thing we have. It's the most valuable currency that we all have. And when we work, we as employee give our most valuable currency to a project, to a company, with the objective of helping it reach its goal. And so I feel very strongly about, that then the project or the company needs to treat you right, that you need to do that you need to respect the gift, because it is a gift that people give you when they do this. And so I was really also excited about the opportunity. When I was at the crypto exchange, I was able to, apply that in the way I approach HR. I had no training in HR, so I was just doing, I was doing with my gut feeling, but it's something I developed while doing it and that I felt very important. And I saw how important it was to the people, because I got the feedback. In this previous company, I had to fire 200 people. I had to recruit around 70 people. So it was a lot of very difficult moment from a human perspective. And it was so important to approach it very kindly and things like this. And so I was very excited to join a company at a stage where I would be able to continue this, to treat people who contribute to the project with respect and put in place process is a little bit too big of a word for a project of our size, but yeah, just basically embody those value and treat the people in the team like this. So it was this kind of wanted to stay in the space. I was also quite excited to go back to work with people I had worked with before, because of course I mentioned Cheng, but again, the other two developers, I actually worked with them in the first company. One of them also is the one that got me into the crypto exchange in the first place. So I was, it's always nice when you have kind of those professional bromance that you can, it's so nice when you can work with people that you respect, that you trust. So I was very excited for that. And maybe the last point, which is more Alephium specific, as I told you, my first experience into crypto was really when the scalability pain point became very apparent. And that was literally my first experience in crypto. So I was very aware of it. And basically, Alephium, one of its value proposition is to solve that scalability issue without making a trade-off on decentralization, programmability, or security. And so there was this aspect, of course, as well. And I was also very keen to learn more about this side of the industry, because on the exchange side of things, of course, you learn about blockchain a little bit, but not so much at a technical level. Like, you don't really understand how a blockchain works, what is proof of work, what is proof of stake, because it's not really relevant to the work I was doing there, at least. So I was quite excited to have an opportunity to learn a completely different side of the industry, which I did. So, yeah.
That was a really interesting story, and I love how you mentioned working with people that you trust and can deliver, and crossing paths in different companies. It's always that kind of nostalgic, but at the same time very very familiar, but also futuristic feeling. Our next question is more on the technology behind Alephium. Although we don't need to go too deep, one thing I'd really like for us to talk about is the decision behind proof of work versus proof of stake, which is, of course, one thing that really makes Alephium unique in my perspective. So could we tackle a little bit more about what is Alephium, why you chose proof of work, and what's its difference between proof of stake?
Yeah, of course. So I think Alephium is a layer one blockchain, and it really came from the question is like, can we deliver a blockchain that is fast, that is scalable, and that supports smart contract, that can support advanced DeFi application while still retaining the core value brought by Bitcoin technology. So decentralization, security, and leveraging then those models, because they bring, there's an elegance and a simplicity to Bitcoin technology that makes it extremely resilient. And so is there a way that we can deliver, again, speed, scalability, and a smart contract environment without losing those property? And that's what Alephium was built for. So there's basically four. main innovation. The first one is around scalability. We use sharding for scalability, so it means parallelization. We basically have multiple chain on the network, but we are what we call a UTXO-based blockchain, like Bitcoin, which basically mean the data that is on chain is transaction. And just to give the context, for example, Ethereum, an account-based chain, the data that is on chain is accounts and balances. And from the change in balances, you reconstruct the transaction. And on a UTXO-based chain, it's the opposite. The data that is on chain is the transaction, and you reconstruct a wallet and its balance by adding up the transaction, basically. And because we are a UTXO-based blockchain, when we partition the network in multiple chain, we're basically partitioning transactions. So transactions are assigned to a specific chain, but it means that unlike sharding on account-based chain, where they basically distribute wallets and accounts across chain, we never have to do cross-chain transaction, because this is usually where the user experience in sharding degrades immensely, is because on an account-based sharded chain, you sometimes have to do transaction across different chain if the two accounts you're trying to transact are not on the same chain. And usually it's at least a two-step process, and the securization of that kind of transaction, because they are cross-chain, is a completely different security mechanism. So you have a degradation of the user experience and to some extent of the security. Because we do sharding on the UTXO model, we don't have that problem, because basically transactions are just assigned to specific chain so that we can parallelize them. And you never have to deal, it's always, you never have to deal with cross-chain transactions. Transactions are always on-chain in a single step and secured by proof of work in our case. And with this block flow, which is our sharding algorithm, we can the network can process over 20,000 TPS, which is pretty performant for a smart contract chain, proof of work chain. So that brings me to the proof of work side. So we are proof of work, and the reason we chose proof of work is if you go back to why Bitcoin was created, what got people excited about blockchain was about, the don't trust, verify. You are the owner of your asset. You don't need to trust anyone. And you can be part of the network. You can verify the information yourself. And that was very important. And I think, obviously also decentralization. And so we feel that proof of work is right now the most robust consensus algorithm that ensure decentralization. And more importantly, it also makes it proof of work node are typically more lightweight. And again, people don't really think about it, but nodes are the network, right? So how easy it is to get your own node, it's how resilient your network is, but also how easy it is for you to verify the information. And on a lot of proof of stakes chain, running a node requires very expensive hardware. I think last I checked, like on Solana, if you look at the hardware recommendation that they have to run a node, it's like $100,000 server. I'm not talking about validator or anything like this, but just if you want to have a Solana node so you can be part of the network, so that you can verify the information of what is happening on chain without relying on an intermediary. This is out of reach for so many people. Whereas on a lot of proof of work chain, specifically on Alephium, you can run an Alephium node on a Raspberry Pi. So you can, without having to trust anyone, have your own copy of the chain, check transaction, and things like this. And I think it's really important. And a scenario we don't think about enough is, again, the resilience of the chain. Imagine if there's a world crisis, or I don't know, and all the nodes, most of the nodes shut down, how quickly can you, again, rebuild your network? How quickly can more nodes can be spin off? How many, in a decentralized fashion? Because of course you can, if you have the money, you can run your Solana nodes in a server. And so yeah, I think this was very important for us from a decentralization perspective, from an accessibility perspective, and again being true to the don't trust, verify ethos that was, you know, at the heart of what excited people about blockchain technology in the first place. But we have a little twist on proof of work because, why do things simple when you can make them better? So we have something called proof of less work this is how we call a consensus algorithm. It's basically once the network reaches a certain hash rate, we introduce, instead of asking miners to just continue to provide more computing power, as the hash rate grows, once we reach that stage, which is 1 exahash, we continue to increase the cost of mining a block, but instead of asking miners to pay that cost exclusively in computing power, gradually they are asking to pay more and more of that cost by burning ALF upfront. So the cost to mine a block is the same as it is on proof of work. So you don't degrade the security, because basically is how expensive is it to mine a block? How expensive is it to attack your network? That stays exactly the same. It's just that that cost past a certain point on Alephium, that cost is paid differently. And part of that cost is paid by burning Alephium token, Alephium coin, sorry, which also introduce a deflationary force on the supply. And then maybe we only have 3 innovations. We could split the last one, but I've been talking already a lot. But the last innovation is around security and smart contract and development environment. So Alephium supports smart contracts, but we have our own accounting model, which is we're UTXO based, but we have our own UTXO model called the Stateful UTXO. We have a lot of documentation about that if people want to dive into it. But in summary, it means for asset management, we use UTXO. So it means that tokens are first-class citizen. They actually exist on the network in the same way the ALF coin exists. Whereas, for example, if you look ERC token, they don't really exist at the protocol layer. They are smart contract based. So they are basically the smart contract that created them holds the truth about ownership, which means that if that smart contract get hacked, for example, even ERC token that you have on your private wallet could be taken out of it, because you can basically change the database, the source of truth. With Alephium, because token are first-class citizen and UTXO based, they exist at the protocol level at the same level as the coin. Just to go back on ERC20, for example, on Ethereum, when you interact with Uniswap or anything, the Ethereum that you interact with there, it's not the native ETH, it's wrapped ETH. So it's ERC20 ETH, because again, it's a different layer on the chain. So we have, for assets, we have all of the security benefit of the UTXO model, but we introduce states, which is basically the benefit of the account model when it comes to programming. So we have our own virtual machine, own smart contract language. It's Turing complete. So it just means that anything you can build on EVM, for example, you can build on Alephium. But we design the virtual machine, the smart contract language, to really mitigate some of the pain points in developer experience, but more importantly, a lot of the attack vector that get exploited in the industry again and again. We build the entire environment to mitigate them when possible, right? So for example, reentrancy attack are not possible on Alephium. And if you go down the rabbit hole of hacks, you will see that the majority of hacks usually exploit reentrancy to drain protocol. So this is not possible on Alephium. We also don't have kind of the very pesky, like if, again, I will take the example of EVM and Ethereum. If you interact with a smart contract, you have to authorize the smart contract to interact with your asset, and before you're able to make any transaction. So you have to you have to do 2 transactions. Basically, you pay twice. You pay to authorize and then to make your transaction. And it happens that then people usually will go for an unlimited amount because they don't want to do this every time, especially, back in the days where making a transaction on Ethereum costed you $5. Costed you $5. But it's also something that opens a lot of security vulnerability, because it means, again, that contract as unlimited access to your fund, whether you're connected to it or not. Because again, that authorization then gets stored in the contract. And that means that even if you disconnect your wallet, if that contract get hacked, that unlimited authorization can then be exploited to drain your wallet, even if you're not connected to the contract. And if you want to revoke that authorization, you can't do this on the wallet. You have to find a third-party website that you can connect your wallet to see your approvals and then revoke them, which again, then you have a lot of phishing risk. Etascan has one, by the way, just for people watching. Like Etascan is a relatively safe website, and they have something to revoke the approval. So that would be a good place to see. But yeah, so there's a lot of again, you from a user experience, from a cost perspective, it's terrible. It's also opened a lot of surface of a lot of attack vector. Again, like, you know, there's two main scams that people that pretend to be support do. They ask you for your seed phrase, or they ask you to connect your wallet to something. And you connect, you sign something, nothing happens. So you think you're fine, but you've signed, you've given authorization, you've given that unlimited authorization, and either right away or within a few weeks, within a few months, or when your wallet hit a certain balance, then it's drained. Anyway, so we don't have that. So there's a lot. Our entire development environment was really designed for developer experience. The language is very intuitive. There's not 1,000 ways to do the same thing. There's built-in check, really, so that the surface of error as the developer is limited. So you can really focus on building. And then at the VM level, there's a lot of again, any security was the core point when it was developed. So mitigating a lot of the risk. Because if you look today, EVM Solidity, it is the most used and adopted language, the one that has been there the longest. But still today, you will see every day experienced developers making dramatic mistakes. You will see hacks on projects that have been audited by 5 super prominent audit firm. And I mean, you know, some people think audit firms are not good, but still, you know, and the same attack vector get exploited again and again. And I think even though we all think, of course, education is important to find like a true product market fit for the whole altcoin DeFi. It's like of course you want more education, you want so that people can use the technology, so that we can onboard more people. But education is not sufficient. When even experienced people aren't able to safely and reliably use the technology, it means the technology also needs to improve. And so for us, it was really important that if what we were proposing to the industry wasn't just a copy-paste of what was been done before, that we were really trying to propose solution that solved real problem when it came to adoption. And I think security, specifically when we're talking about assets and stuff, is just paramount. So that's everything about Alephium. I went a bit on a tangent, but I hope it was still interesting enough.
Yeah, definitely. I have quite a lot of questions, but you mentioned something a while ago that like I was kind of blown away. Of course, like the thing where you connect your wallet and stuff like that. Like, yeah, definitely. Like everybody talks about the seed phrase hacking, but they don't really talk about the wallet connection compromises. But something I would like to maybe ask a little bit more on is you mentioned about the cost of running a node is significantly low. So in my mind, like I was just imagining how it would fit into institutional grade, you know, where like nodes kind of have to be validated and then like they need to run their own nodes on an institutional level. Um, I just like to ask maybe a little bit more about the ecosystem of Alephium. Like, what are maybe some use cases or like some interesting use cases, just so that we can understand the whole ecosystem or the use case of Alephium at that when it comes to the node usage, especially since like the cost of the node is significantly low. I don't know. I'm just imagining a lot of things. I would love to know what's the state of Alephium now.
Yeah, of course. I mean, so it's not necessarily related. So the ease of running a node also plays into how decentralized your ecosystem can be, because again, if running your own node is going to cost you 100,000 just to buy the server, right, and then forget the electricity costs and all of that, obviously usually you will tend to have a centralization of where people are getting their data, because then you have people whose job is basically to make those nodes available, and then people subscribe to it. And so you create some sort of centralization in your ecosystem, because basically running a node is not accessible to everyone. So on the Alephium side, so where the ease of running a node impact the ecosystem is that you can have theoretically a much more decentralized and resilient ecosystem, because basically people don't have to rely either on public node or on node providers to run their own node. I will say though that sadly, I would say a good proportion still do, by convenience, because it just don't, because if you run the node, obviously when there's upgrade, you have to upgrade it, you have to say this. And so a lot of people, for convenience, they will go for public nodes just because they just, they don't want to be bothered. But the point is, if they wanted to, they could. Whereas in some proof of stake ecosystem, if they wanted to, they couldn't. So, but still, so on the ecosystem of Alephium, I mean, I haven't checked recently, because actually ecosystem management is something I've handed over. So I'm not as connected as I used to be. So at the time I last checked, we had over 70 projects into the ecosystem. I think where we had the initial adoption, and where I would say there's the most lasting adoption, is DeFi, DEX, lending protocol, and kind of the DeFi primitive is really where there was the most adoption. And it was the initial, and I think the most lasting throughout cycles. But we also have now gearing up for mainnet. We have prediction markets. We have tokenization of hash rate. So this is a nice overlap between proof of work and DeFi. So for people to being able to basically buy hash rate mining power and get the yield from that mining power without having the complexity of managing the mining infrastructure that goes with it. And obviously, again, because it's tokenized, then you can expand that into a lot of DeFi protocols, and you can imagine a lot of very interesting use cases. I know there's more. I haven't gotten my list, but there's there's really, I would say, still DeFi is where there's the most adoption right now. It depends. Like prediction market is not DeFi, but I mean it's still betting. So I mean it's still money. So it depends in which category. But the prediction market, people are quite excited about it. So yeah, pretty excited for it to come live. They are on testnet. So yeah, there's really a lot of different things. I mean, we also had several gaming projects, but I think in the Web3 space, gaming is a use case that comes a lot, but I think lasting adoption is really challenging to find like the right, between the gameplay, the tokenomics, like finding the right balance so that you can have adoption that really lasts through cycles. It's very challenging. We have also some RWA projects, some RWA project to some extent. Actually, tokenization of miners and of hash rate is a RWA project, right? Because they are tokenizing a real world asset as well. But yeah, I also sorry. And then broader than actual than protocol and project, there's also a lot. We spent a lot of time working on developing the ecosystem and having really all of the foundation for it. So we have an Oracle as well. We have a lot of hardware wallets that are supported. So Ledger, Tangem, SafePal. Tangem, I don't know how to say it without a French accent. So people never know who I'm talking about, but they are the one who do the ring. So I just don't know how to say the name without a French accent. One key also, Gold Shell actually also has a hardware wallet. We also have custody solution. So we work with Prime Vault for custody solution, and actually we mine, which is the hash rate, the tokenization of hash rate miners project. They collaborated with Prime Vault because they needed a custody solution that supported Alephium, but also Bitcoin. Like they needed a proper institutional grade custody solution. So it was perfect that we worked with Prime Vault, which, by the way, incredible team, doing really great stuff in the space. So yeah, we spent a lot of time making sure that no matter what you came to build, you had the tools, the resources for you to build.
My next question is more about the virtual machine and maybe the programming languages used and like how friendly it is for developers. So on our end, we also train developers in different like blockchain programming language like Rust, Solidity, and stuff like that. But like we'd also love to explore more opportunities as well for developers. And now it seems like Solidity, the opportunities or the competitiveness for Solidity is getting harder for developers. So especially if you're new in the space and you're trying to learn a programming language, could you tell us a little bit more about the virtual machine of Alephium and then the programming language and the whole developer sides?
Yeah, of course. Before I dive into this, would it be okay because because now my brain suddenly got back on and I have a few other projects to talk about. So I mentioned the prediction market, Aura. We also, which again I also say with a very strong French accent, but there's a few words like this. Somehow my brain it just can't. So Aura, the prediction market, getting ready for mainnet. We also have Links, which is a Morpho style lending protocol that will come and add to the lending ecosystem that we have, because we have a dApp called Alpbanks, which is lending but through stablecoin. So over collateralized stablecoin, you basically lock your Alf, you get I forgot ABD, so Alpbanks dollar as a loan. So we have this. There's also a lot of WeMine that we spoke about. Moonshot Box, which is basically, I don't know how to explain, but you can win participation in pre-sale. Basically a lot of things to win. And they have actually already supported a lot of our ecosystem projects, but they were on Polygon. And now they are expanding to Alephium, so that's, they can support the Alephium ecosystem while being on Alephium as well. Baby Pool tool, which is a lot of tooling. And then we have a lot of our flagship dApp, for example, the Launchpad, which is also one of the best success story that we have in the ecosystem. They are kind of launching a V2. So really, getting to that second phase of the project. After that, we have NFT marketplace also kind of again entering kind of the second summer, and same for DEX with Alexium. So now I've said a little bit more. I've said a little bit more about that. So we can go back to your question about the virtual machine. About the virtual machine. Okay, so the virtual machine itself is coded in Scala, but as a developer, you don't really need to know. that. What you need to know is the smart contract language and everything. So the smart contract language is Half. It's our own smart contract language, but it's very close to Rust with a sprinkle of Solidity where it makes sense, and it's a domain-specific language. So it's kind of a subset. It's a small language. Again, there's not a million ways to do it. And what we've seen, and again, as I said before, both the VM and the smart contract language and an entire development environment has been built by developers who wanted it to be developer friendly. And so it's really been thought so that development is intuitive. And this is really the feedback that we've received, because now, I've been saying this since the beginning of Alephium, but obviously in the beginning, we didn't have that much external developers using it because, you present the tech. And thankfully, I can say after now almost 3 years of people building on it, the feedback was unanimously what I was saying and confirming what I was saying is that it's extremely intuitive, very easy to grasp. Usually what people struggle a little bit more is the UTXO model, the paradigm of the UTXO model versus account model, because people who are used to programming smart contract, basically they do this on account-based chain, because that's where you can do it the most. And so it's more the paradigm of the UTXO model of the sharding rather than the language itself that takes a little bit more time to restructure your thought, because it's a different paradigm. But the language itself, we've had people coming from Solana, Polygon, Cadena, Ripple, many different ecosystems with very different level, and everyone unanimously said it's very intuitive for a young language that is relatively unknown. There's a lot of tooling, a lot of documentation relative to the adoption and scale of the project and the language. And we even had a one-day hackathon at an event with only people who never knew about Alephium, never built there. And again, everyone was able to build something, and the feedback was that even though there's less documentation maybe than on Solidity or Solana, they were able to get it so much quicker and much more intuitive. So I'm very happy that what I had been saying, the first year or so, without anyone except dev telling me this, has been backed by every feedback we've received so far. Because I think, if you're choosing to not be an EVM chain, to not use Solidity, you make your life very difficult when it comes to integration. When it comes to integration and ecosystem integration and interoperability. But we did it because, again, like I said in the beginning of the interview, it was important for us not to just build a copy of what already exists and just give it another name, change a couple parameters, but to really try and bring solution to recurring problem in the industry. So it was very important for us to bring something new. And so at least I'm very happy that the language itself, the feedback has been unanimously positive, because I've seen other layer one that have custom language where the language itself was very, very complicated. And yeah, that's not great.
Thanks so much for sharing about that on the developer perspective. And we're excited to like maybe toy with it and like discover a little bit more about the programming language, the VM, and everything about Alephium. I think the next question we have is more about the current state of Alephium and what's the next state. Because I know you mentioned a lot of projects upcoming, but maybe you as a layer one, what's your priorities moving forward? Where are you right now? What's maybe some developments that people can expect from Alephium?
Yeah, so one thing that we've done since the original mainnet launch of Alephium is like we've had continuous upgrade and update to the network to make it more performant, more user-friendly, more developer-friendly, and continue to improve the network. And we've done 3 network upgrade to date, which now have really taken Alephium at a very competitive space when it comes to technology. And so the next focus is really around the application layer, both by supporting the ecosystem nurturing project, because the beginning of our ecosystem started in what turned out to be our bull run in the end for us, like end of 2023, beginning of 2024. And so now for us, our season right now is winter. And so it's really nurturing the ecosystem, the project that, have gone through this with us, bringing more projects into the ecosystem, but also on our end to lead by example. And one of the big focus since this summer, because we had our network upgrade in our latest one in July, has been on what we call a core DApp. So this will be a DEX that works synergistically both with the protocol, but also with the entire ecosystem. So it's a DEX which doesn't have a token. The coin it doesn't have a token, and basically the fees of the DEX will go to half of it will be used to buy back and burn ALF, and the other half will be used to incentivize long-term holder of ALF. Basically, people will be able to stake ALF and receive yield that comes from the fees of the DEX. So it's really kind of introducing, because we're proof of work, there's no native staking. And I think probably if I made a stat, the most asked question is, can we stake Alephium? And so they are already yield opportunity on Alephium. Again, you can provide liquidity into protocol, you can lend, you can lend, so that they are relatively advanced ways to generate yield for people. There's risk that you need to be aware of, like not everyone understand impermanent loss and kind of all of those risks. And so we wanted really a core app that's made like not two birds, but many birds, one stone. One, led by example by making like a open source, well audited code that can be reused, that can be built on top, that really showcase the best way to leverage the virtual machine, the smart contract language, and Alephium technology specificities into one that brought value to the ecosystem and to long-term holders, but also gave an entry point into DeFi. Because here, obviously, there's always risk, always, but here you have the smart contract risk, and the yield comes from fees on the DEX. So it's a relatively easy entry into DeFi, into getting yield. And because we are proof of work, a lot of our ecosystem isn't necessarily, DeFi debt gen, right? But they are interested. They want to have yield opportunity, but going right away into liquidity provision on a DEX, it's a big step, and then again, by introducing staking also, this can lead the way to on-chain governance. There's already on-chain governance, of course. Proof of work, you can fork the network, if you don't like it, or if you want to, anyone can propose change, and then you have to just convince the majority of the network to follow you, but you always have governance through fork, right? But here it introduced an additional level for the ecosystem, because with the if you stake ALF, for example, then this can be the foundation into building voting system associated with that, and start introducing, or at least experimenting with ecosystem governance as well. So that's kind of really our focus right now.
Thank you so much for that. I just want to ask, like, maybe a little bit more about what are your thoughts on like the institutions like starting to get involved with crypto. I know you explained a lot about the DeFi narrative and how you're very, very supportive of those native builders or crypto native builders. But like, what about the institutions that are entering the ecosystem? Maybe what are your thoughts, or what's Alephium's stance, or like, are you currently working with maybe banks or big corporations or those sort?
As of now, we don't have like big traditional institution use cases, but this is definitely something we are preparing for. Again, when we did the integration with Prime Vault, the thing where it's I have to say, we're a bit at a disadvantage, because usually traditional institutions that enter the space, they don't necessarily have the competence in-house. So they will they will prioritize convenience over any other aspect at first, because they have to educate themselves, right? So they have a tendency of favoring, for example, again, Ethereum, because, there's a lot of standard already, a lot of things that you can reuse. There's a lot of developers, good, not always good, but you have a lot of options, let's say, and it's very convenient. But I think, as they are currently entering the space, and they also have to learn by doing, right? So they tend to favor in the beginning the most convenient option, but I am convinced that, as they get more and more comfortable into this space, they will want to improve the pain point. Again, the fact that most retail, what we found acceptable when it came to security definitely isn't in an institutional setting. And so they will be looking for a solution that solves those problems, and Alephium has been built for that. So I think that while we might not be the most obvious and the most natural first entry, I think we become a very compelling option as that knowledge and that experience built with an institutional. But we are still obviously looking, putting ourselves to try and be that first entry point, but also a little bit realistic about just the world that we are evolving in. I mean, we have one potential big institutional use case, which is with Gigaton, which is it's gigabig, so it's complicated to summarize, but it's in the energy sustainability field. So they work a lot with basically solar infrastructure, electric infrastructure, originally solar and charging infrastructure for electric vehicle, but that can be extended to a lot of different things that can be extended to mining farms that would leverage solar electricity, basically. So they're a big company, and they are looking to eventually tokenize their entire value chain, basically, from the investment side. So the investment that goes into building infrastructure, that infrastructure, and the output of that infrastructure, specifically carbon credits. And they really are interested into tokenizing everything so that they can automate things, but more importantly, provide irrefutable transparency on what funds go for which infrastructure and what is the output from that infrastructure, because carbon credit are a big topic, but it's also so much greenwashing, and they have a lot of issue with fraud and things like that. And basically blockchain allows them to bring that accountability. And they announced that they are looking to build all of that on Alephium eventually, or a big chunk of that on Alephium. And so, that's proper institutional and a lot of time governmental projects. So this is very long term. But this was a big validation because they chose a proof of work chain. And actually, the fact that we were proof of work was one of the deciding factor, because as a company active in the energy sector, if you follow a bit proof of work, you know that 5-6 years ago, proof of work was a devil. It killed the environment. It was the end of the world. It was really a lot of lobby against proof of work as a environmental catastrophe. But over the last, now I want to say 1 to 2 years, there's been a complete flip. And you see energy company investing in mining because it is extremely powerful to leverage the surplus of electricity to finance also transition to renewable energy infrastructure, because it's something that monetize your unused electricity and you can turn it on and off. Because the biggest issue one of the big issue electric network have is, in a lot of places, they can't afford to dimension it for peak usage, because that happens maybe twice a few weeks a year, and the rest of the year the infrastructure is not used and it costs them way too much money. But if it's combined with mining, you can utilize and finance basically that surplus of electricity when you don't need it, and when you need it, you just turn off the machine. And so it's one of the most powerful tool to finance hopefully renewable electric infrastructure without needing governmental subsidy, because it finances itself basically. And so anyway, they understood that for a long time and are very happy that this is becoming in the energy sector. People are starting to understand this. And so for them, it was really important. They loved that we were proof of work, because it's something that then they can leverage. And because one of the use cases they are looking into is, again, solar powered mining farm, or solar powered also AI server, actually. And so that ties very nicely together, because they are convinced that can help transition to a more sustainable energy practices. And obviously, because they are talking about very expensive, like a lot of money, security is crucial. So we really fit we were one of the only, if not the only, chain that really ticked all the boxes: smart contract, security, and proof of work. So it was a great validation, but this is we're kind of at the end of the value chain. We're the nice to have. So it takes a long time to materialize, but that was a really great validation for the project as well. And as it takes shape, I think it can be a really very powerful a use case to position Alephium on the institutional side.
I think our last question is more about your personal thoughts about the industry. Because I mean, like with the institutional involvement in crypto or blockchain or the space, basically, a lot of people might say, or some people might say, we're reaching the end phase of adoption, like because the institutions are involved. I would love your personal thoughts on whether it's early, it's late, and what do you think will be the next phase for crypto?
I mean, I think so. This is personal thoughts, and I don't think too much about that. So I'm going to articulate it as I speak to you. So I hope I don't say anything terrible. But my first thought is that blockchain was actually Bitcoin came, and a lot of the blockchain industry, the Web3 industry, was about again building an economy, a financial system outside of institution. And so for me, because institution were what created the problem in the first place, that led to the creation of Bitcoin. And so I think a big objective, I think, I could be wrong, but was this: to create a financial system, to create financial freedom and opportunity for people outside of institution, outside of traditional system, because those are not accessible to everyone. And can be abused, have been abused, etc. So I think institution entering the space, if we collectively decide as an industry that this is the end, it means we kind of decided to repeat the system. We've accepted that that's the only system, and now it's just doing that same system transition to just a much better infrastructure, which is progress, right? I think the financial system does need a better infrastructure, and so it might still be a win that is worth it, right? That ultimately in time, because it reduced cost, improve efficiency, it might trickle down into a lot of into those benefits. But I feel like if we consider that institution coming in is the end, when I don't think right now we've achieved that vision of financial freedom and access. I think access and the right of self-determination, like it's your asset, you invest them how you want, and you have access, whether you want to invest $10 or $1 million, you have access to the same opportunities. Because I think in the traditional system today, and depending on how much you want to invest, you definitely don't have access to the same opportunities. You definitely not. And that's just on the investment side. There's a whole chunk of the world who is unbanked. But they still need somehow access to the financial system in some way. And for them, actually, institution coming in the space doesn't solve their problem. And so for me, I still believe in this vision. So I would say that institution coming into the space, I personally wouldn't want that the industry consider it at the end, because I think then, again, that's not my vision, let's say. So for me, it wouldn't be the end, and I hope that we don't collectively decide that this is the end of that cycle. I hope we see this as a validation, it's a validation because that industry wants in, and they realize that to retain their position, they need to be part of this ecosystem. So I think this is a very strong validation of the value proposition of the technology. And for me, this should kickstart the second phase, which is the getting to maturity, basically. Because I think it's a mistake to think that because institutional are coming in, the technology in the industry is mature. It has proven its use cases, and they want in. And they want to be part of the innovation. They want to leverage it. But it basically, you validated your kind of your market need. But I think there's still a lot of maturity, both from a technological, from a use case, from an education perspective, that needs to be reached. So for me, it's not the end. It's the beginning. It's the confirmation that we were not just crazy people having fun in our bubble on the side and, like this. But it's even more important now that we don't stop building the important thing. Again, access and democratization of financial opportunity for people.
Maud, thank you so much for your time. Before you go, is there anything you want to tell the audience?
No, I think I spoke way too much. I haven't done an interview in a while, and I talk too much always. But when I do several interviews in a row, I'm better at reining myself in. So I think I've spoken enough. Thank you so much for all of those questions. I hope, despite me rambling a lot, I hope that it was interesting for you and that it will be very interesting to our listeners as well.
It was definitely interesting, and we learned a lot as well. Thank you so much. Bye bye.